Hello, Matthias. Thanks to be here.
Hello.
Before to start the interview, you know already that we are going to talk about the school system and teaching. Yeah. But before we start, I would ask you to introduce yourself for the people that don't know you yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I am a philosophy teacher in high school in Sweden, and I have been I've been a teacher for almost 20 years, and I've been teaching philosophy for, I don't know, 13, 14 years maybe, and I'm also a philosophical practitioner for the last 4 or 5 years. So that's something I do on the side, but to be a teacher, it's my day job.
Yeah. So you started 20 years ago to teach, right?
Yeah, kind of 19 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But when you started, you were not teaching philosophy, right?
No, I was English and Swedish.
Ah, okay.
And I
Okay.
still teach English. I teach English and philosophy in high school.
Okay. Okay. And let me ask you, why did you become a teacher, you would say?
Oh, well, I think it's because I was always interested in language and literature. And I thought I'm never going to be an author. I'm never going to make a living writing books or anything like that. So I thought, well, maybe I could teach. I could teach literature. I can teach language. So that's why I went to university. Then I studied English, Swedish, became a teacher. So I thought at least I can incorporate this in some kind of way into my life, into my work.
Yeah.
I think that was the main idea.
So you have been teaching for almost 20 years. So I guess you've been teaching to different generation of students, right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
I would like to know which are the main difference you notice, you've been noticed like to teach like 20 years ago and teaching like now.
Mm. One big difference is, I would say, the kind of support that you give students, let's say students with some kind of disabilities, if they have dyslexia or whatever. They have more rights now, which means that they also have more demands now because they know their rights. I think in a way it's a good thing, but it can also be excessive.
Yeah.
For instance, let's say dyslexia, it's quite common. Nowadays, if you have dyslexia, it means that you have the right to have all of the text recorded so you can listen to them. So you don't have to read them.
And you have to provide them as a teacher?
I have to provide them. Yes. Yeah. And which means that when I find texts, I try to find texts which either they're already recorded or maybe there can be some tools that you can use to, digitally fix the text so that they are, yeah.
And do you have to provide schemes or something like that as well?
Provide schemes?
Yeah, for the students like that. Like you prepare a kind of schemes of the lecture and you give them.
It's not mandatory. No.
Ah, okay.
It's suggested, yes, that it's a good thing for most students. So I would say usually I don't so much.
Oh, okay.
I don't. Why is it different between different teachers? I don't plan my classes in detail so much in advance, so I don't usually provide a prepared scheme for the class.
Yeah. It's not mandatory in Italy, by the way, either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So one big difference is about this type of student that are demanding.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and also everything digitalized now, so that's also a big change, of course. And since Sweden is a country where we like to be progressive and we like everything that's new, of course we jumped on this digitalization, so we don't use pen and paper anymore. Basically, they write everything on computers.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time even when all the school books were, online. ebooks. But it's kind of a backlash now, so people realize it's actually a good skill to be able to write with pen and paper and to read proper books, to have a book out of paper in your hand. But mainly when it comes to writing, it's mostly done on the computer, so then you have spell checks and grammar checks, so you don't even need to know how to spell anymore. And of course, that's available to everyone, but especially, let's say, if you have dyslexia, you have the right to have it.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. It can be a bit excessive. If I go to school and I have dyslexia, basically it means I don't have to read if I don't want to. I don't have to learn how to spell if I don't want to, because I'm allowed, I'm entitled to all of these, all of the help, all of these support systems.
About this, let me ask you, how can you distinguish the lack of will of the student and the, let's say, incapacity of the student?
Well, it's hard. Well, they go together as well, If there is an incapacity, there is also usually a lack of will. You don't like to do things you don't know how to do. But sometimes as well, you can see in a student if they are willing to at least try, and if they want to get better.
Yeah.
Or if they just want you to help them, or you can see if they don't want to do any work, if they just want to have everything served.
Yeah. And how do you deal with this, let's say, attitude when you know that a student is not like trying to study? Can you do something in order to push him to study, or you just accept that this guy is not going to study anything?
I can encourage them, of course.
Yeah.
I can't force them to do anything.
Yeah. Okay.
But of course, I can encourage them. And but then if there is no will, if there is no interest in the student to actually put in some kind of work, that's okay. There's not much you can do, unless it becomes a problem, of course, if they fail their courses, because for some reason you have to try to figure out what is the reason. Why does it happen? But if it's a student which they pass their courses, but you see there's a lack of interest, they don't respond to your encouragements, then
Okay.
then you put your focus mainly on the students who do not pass their courses. As well, there's a risk that the good students, maybe they don't get the support to become even better, because you tend to focus on the student who really need the help.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you think about this amount of technology that is in the school now? Do you think is better, or do you prefer before?
I'm becoming more conservative, the older I get. I was very much into, let's say 10, 15 years ago, I loved it, everything digital. Now I see a problem.
That's a sign that you're getting older, Mathias.
Yeah, I know it. But yeah, well, of course, there's a problem with phones and social media.
Yeah.
You need to, okay, so we usually have, like a cupboard in the classroom. We tell the students, okay, you put your phone here. Because I don't like to be a police to enforce rules, but now I've realized that I have to.
Yeah.
Because they could spend 60, 70, 80% of the class looking at the phone, so then you have to do something about it. And also, of course, it's useful with a computer. And the world we live in, it wouldn't be feasible to only have pen and paper. You need to be online. You need a computer. You need to write Word documents. But also in the computer, you have access to social media and YouTube and everything. So it is problematic. Indeed, it is.
Okay. And so you think that before there was more concentration, let's say, from the student was easier, even if there was or because there was less technology in school?
I think it was easier, yes. It doesn't mean that the students were more interested or more engaged necessarily, but you didn't have this distraction now. Yeah. Now it's so easy to do something else. Before, you were in the classroom, you had your stuff in front of you, and if you didn't want to do it, you could talk to your neighbor or look out of the window, but now you have all of this distraction in your computer and in your phone, so it's easier to get distracted now.
Yeah. It's something I noticed as well here in Italy, that I think is one of the most biggest problem of teacher is to getting the focus and the concentration of the student. So because yeah, they are so used to distractions. So in a way, it's kind of an addiction. They need to distract themselves. But before we enter a bit in the criticism or in the observation about the school system, can you explain? Can you tell us a bit about the Sweden school system? Because I guess it's quite different than Italian one. Yeah.
Yeah, we have. Okay, first we have compulsory school, of course. So it's 9 years. Now I think also a year of preschool is compulsory now. So it's basically 10 years, a year of preschool and then 9 years of compulsory school.
So when you start at the 5 or 6 or something like that?
You start school at, well, 7 really, but parents can choose if they want their kids to start when they're 6.
Okay.
If you think you have a bright kid or something, you can decide now he's going to start when he's 6. So 6 or 7. So then preschool the year before.
So just one school for 9 years?
Yeah, they divided into 3 different stages.
Okay.
Again, I think it is because it changes a bit, but I think they've changed back to this now. So the first 3 years is the lower stage, then you have 3 years of the middle stage, and then 3 years of a higher stage.
Okay, because for example, this is a difference with the Italian school system, because we start at 5, 6 years old, and we have like 5 years of elementary school, and then we go in a middle school for 3 years. But you have basically these 2 schools together, divided in 3 different stages in the same school, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then you can choose to go to the high school, right?
Yes, indeed. High school or upper secondary, yeah. It's voluntary, but most kids do it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know the exact figures, but I would think it's 80% something, somewhere in the 80s, go to high school.
Okay, and how long does it last to the high school?
It's 3 years.
3 years. Okay, tell us something about teaching philosophy. When do you teach philosophy? In the first year, in all the 3 years of high school, or just at the end, or what part of the year? How does it work?
Yeah. First of all, it's a very tiny subject in Sweden, philosophy. So not all of the students take philosophy.
So it's not mandatory, yeah.
It's mandatory for some students.
Okay.
So students at the humanities program and the social sciences program and the economics program, those who specialize in law, for them it's mandatory.
Okay.
But for the rest it's not. But
they can choose anyway. They may do it.
They may do it, yes. Anyone can choose it. But okay, we have a system where you have a certain number of subjects which you can choose freely from a list. So it's basically 2 courses. In year 2, you can choose 1 course from a list, whichever course you like, and in year 3 as well. And then it's up to the school which subjects they want to put on that list, depending on what teachers they have and so on. So philosophy is not necessarily on that list. So in my school, some of the years philosophy has been taken off the list because there was a lack of interest, and then I campaigned to get it back on the list, and sometimes I succeeded. So they put philosophy back on the list, but still, I never had enough students who chose philosophy to actually be able to get a group of students who did it voluntarily. So maybe only 3 or 4 students at most decided they wanted to take it. Okay. So then we didn't start it. So I've only been teaching the students for whom it's mandatory. Yeah.
Okay, and how long do you teach them for?
In the humanities program, it's for a year. So it's divided in 2 courses, philosophy 1 and philosophy 2. And in the humanities program specializing in culture, for them, both of the courses are mandatory. But for the rest of them, it's only philosophy 1, which is mandatory.
What is philosophy 1?
Well, okay, I can tell you the content. It's crazy.
No, just to have an idea about it.
Yeah, sure. But it's I know in Italy it's basically history of philosophy or history of ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here it's more divided into themes. So the different themes you're supposed to teach in philosophy, it's basically the same in philosophy 1 and philosophy 2, but philosophy 2 is more, you go more in depth into it. But you're supposed to teach ontology and epistemology, theory of science and scientific methods, moral philosophy, ethical theories, existential questions, social philosophy, philosophy of language, argumentation analysis, concept analysis,
Okay.
current philosophical trends like gender issues, sustainable development, and so on. And based on this as well, the students are supposed to be able to describe, discuss, argue, compare, identify, analyze, explain, form an opinion, and so on.
Okay, so you use, let's say, different topics in order to develop different skills or competencies.
Yeah. And within these different topics, I can choose what I want to bring up, which philosophers I want to bring up as well. So there's no fixed list.
Okay.
I have this, but then I can do it in which way I want to do it.
Yeah. And how many hours do you do per week with one classroom?
About 3 hours a week. And yeah, for most of the students, it's just for one term, philosophy 1.
Yeah.
It's either from August to December or it's from January to May. And it's the last year.
Yeah.
Year 3.
And what about exams? Do you do like I don't know, every month one exam, oral or written, or you do just a final one at the end of the year?
Also, that's up to the teacher.
Mm.
You decide how you want to do it. And I don't do final exams. So I usually divide the term into a few different segments, let's say 4 or 5 different segments.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have some kind of test after each segment. It could be a written exam, could be something oral, could be essay writing, I try to vary it a bit. Because some students, they perform better when it's oral, some perform better when it's essay writing, some like taking tests. I try to do a little bit of everything. It's completely up to me to decide how to do it or what I want to do.
And what if they fail the test? What happened? They have more chance to do it again. How does it work?
If they fail a test, yes, they can do it again.
Yeah.
And that's up to, it's up to the school or up to the teachers sometimes to decide how you want to do it. Sometimes, okay, philosophy is a tiny subject. So usually, at least, I have been the only philosophy teacher at my school because there are so few students who take philosophy. So then I decide what I want to do. But yes, if they fail a test, they can do it again.
Okay.
Or if they fail a written test, then I think this student might be able to do it. If we do it orally, then yes, I can propose let's take a retest, but let's do it orally this time. They come to me, we have a discussion about it, and I can check if you have the knowledge.
Yeah. Okay.
So you always provide them with some chance to make up for a failed test.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, we didn't specify this, but you teach in the public school, right? Or it's a private one?
It's a public school, yes. So we basically have 2 different types of schools mainly. So it's you can call it a public school. It's run by the municipality, by the town, by the city. So there is a national school board, of course, so everyone has the same curriculum, everyone follows the same rules and guidelines and so on. But the actual day-to-day management of the schools, it's governed by the city, by the municipality. And then we have free schools as well, which are more run like companies, like businesses. So they have the same curriculums and so on, but then you have an owner, which could be privately owned, but it could be a company, it could be even a conglomerate. And they, of course, they make money out of it. That's the point of a business. But those are the 2 main school systems we have. But I'm teaching at a municipality-run school.
Have you ever taught in the companies, let's say in the private ones?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. which are the main difference do you reckon between the two school system?
My work as a teacher, it wasn't very different between the two systems. But I would say the main difference is, well, it's a consequence of the system. So when we have this system, the schools need to compete, like on a market, need to compete for the students. So it's like the students become customers, so they need to attract students. And the free schools can basically choose which students they want. Well, they can decide, for instance, okay, we can take 500 students in total. And they can decide we're only going to take the 500 best students. And the rest we don't want.
Is there a selection before to enter in the school in that case?
Well, then it would be a selection of grades.
Ah, okay.
One who has the best grades from compulsory school, they compete with their grades.
Yeah.
They always compete with their grades. But then the municipality-run schools, of course, they have to accept the students that are left, because no student who wants to go to school can be, turned out of school.
Yeah.
There's no possibility that all schools would say, no, we don't want you, because you have the right to go to school if you want to. So then the municipality-run schools have to take the students that the free schools don't want.
Yeah.
But then when you compete about the students, you need to compete with different methods, different strategies. So let's say 10, 15 years ago, they competed with computers, come to order. But now everyone has a computer, so now they tend to compete with grades. If you come to us, we will make sure that you get good grades, you get good teaching, you get good grades, because we afford good grade, we afford high grades to the students. But when you compete about grades, there is always the risk of some kind of corruption. Of course, that you give the students better grades than they deserve, because then you can attract more students. So there is this tendency, maybe it's not so widespread, but it happens. And it happened this week. It was news that broke. There was a free school where the headmaster, she had told her teachers that if you want a pay raise, you need to give the students higher grades. I'm not happy with the grades I see here. So if you want me to pay you more, I need better grades. So don't fail so many students. So there is that kind of, it's illegal, of course.
Yeah.
But it happens, it exists. I've never been exposed to it myself, but I know it happens. And generally, free schools tend to give students higher grades than the public schools. So there is this inequality.
Yeah. I guess that this affect your way to teach, right?
It can.
And how?
Not necessarily. It depends on whether you care about it or not.
Ah, okay.
But yeah, sure. You can, maybe you're a bit more lenient. Maybe you accept things you wouldn't accept otherwise because you don't want to fail students, or maybe you are shown a comparison with other schools, and maybe your school is a bit low in the grades, and maybe then you might feel the pressure. We need to raise the grades a bit. But so the easiest way out would be, of course, to lower the standards and maybe make the teaching a little bit easier, not so demanding.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't provide the students with difficult text because you know this will be difficult for them, and it will take a lot of time, and it's easier to do something else. It's easier to find some newspaper article. It doesn't require so much of the students, and you try to get them through the system, get them through the course in an easier way. Yes. So then in a way you corrupt yourself.
So it's up to the teacher. Yeah.
It's basically up to the teacher.
Yeah. But at the same time, I guess that since grades are so important, this can influence the learning, not just the teaching.
Yeah, they want good grades. Yes, indeed. So that's a big issue. Every time you start a new course with new students, you always have some students asking you, how do I get the highest grade? So they want you to provide a recipe. They want you to tell them, do this to get an A. So A is the highest grade.
Yeah.
But if I tell them, you have to study hard. Yes, the grades, in many cases, grades are more important than learning. So I had a student last year She told me very sincerely that, well, you know, Matthias, we're not here to learn. We're here to get grades. We can go to university. She told me this like it was, you know, it's something I should know already. I should feel a bit stupid if I didn't realize it. We're here for the grades. Just deal with it.
It's a funny paradox because, I mean, grades are meant to be instruments in order to push students study. But if they study just for grades, it doesn't make sense.
But that's what you get.
Yeah.
Of course, where you compete with your grades to get into the university you want to get into, to get to the education you want. So then, of course, it's normal. Grades become the point of education.
And what about homework? Do you give homework to the students, or you prefer not to do it? Okay, you can do it. How does it work?
Again, it's up to the teacher. You decide. So yes, you can do it. I don't do it so much. The homework I do, it's maybe to read text to prepare something for the next class. So I don't give the kind of homework where you need to study, you know, for it, because I know a lot. Also, it's an equality issue. I know some students they manage very well by themselves. You can give them something, they can go home and they can do it. Some students they just can't manage it. They need a lot of help, and maybe they don't have parents who can help them. So I usually don't give homework where you need some kind of skills or where you need some external help in order to do it.
Yeah.
So the homework would be some kind of preparation. Just read this text so you're familiar with it, or whatever, something that anyone could do.
Yeah. Okay. So you in the classroom you work on some philosophical text, I guess, or you do also, let's say, lectures.
Yeah, it's a mix. Yes. So I do some lectures. I give some lectures. Yes, I do. Not the entire class. But I know it can be quite tiring. So if I have a 90-minute class, I don't give a 90-minute lecture, but I give part of the class can be a lecture. But we do read some text, yes, because I know young people today, they don't read much. So I think it's a useful skill, and it's a necessary skill to read. So I always make sure that we read things. But then we read it together. I try to find texts that are not too demanding. I try to find proper philosophical text. I think it's nice, but something which is a bit more easily accessible. I say Plato or Descartes or something. I wouldn't give them Hegel or Heidegger, but some texts that are possible to read. But then we read it together and we talk about it, and they can ask questions about it, and I try to explain it and so on. So we work with text. Yes.
And okay, let me ask you now, which have been the main difficulties you've been facing in teaching so far?
When it comes to philosophy, one difficulty is to manage to cover everything you're supposed to cover, because it's just too much for one term, so it's impossible. So I've never managed. I don't know any philosophy teacher who ever managed to actually cover all of it, especially since the students, they know nothing about philosophy. It's completely new to them. And lots of these competencies they're supposed to develop and use, like arguing and analyzing, identifying, comparing, they're not very used to it. They haven't been trained in it, most of them anyway. You need to spend time in working on this, so it's the time is never enough. So that's an issue. Another issue is encouraging students to put in the work themselves, because it is different. Of course, in a class you always have students who are very eager to learn, students who are very eager to do the work, but you also have students who are not so interested. They're there because they have to, because they want an education. They want to move on to university, so they need a degree, they need a grade, but they're not really interested. So that's an issue, of course, to make. Okay, I say make them because sometimes it feels like it's up to you to make them pass the course. Because if they don't pass the course, if you fail them, then somehow it comes back and it becomes your problem. Because then they have the right to retake the course if there is time, or they have the right to get some kind of test the course again, so they can get a passing grade. So then let's say if I fail 3 students, then they can come back to me and say, okay, I want you to test me on this course. Then I have to provide tests for them, which cover the course contents, and I have to find times where they can do the tests, and then I have to grade, read, mark, and grade the tests, and all of it. So the more students I fail, the more students I fail, the more work for me. So that's also you corrupt yourself. You try to see, is it possible to pass these students, or do I have to fail them?
Yeah.
So that's always an issue.
Okay, but so I guess it must not be really like frequent that students don't pass the exams because of this issue, right?
It always happens, yes. There are always a few.
Okay.
Or let's say I usually have around 30 students, something like that, in a class. And then normally maybe, let's say on an average, 2 students in each class fail the course. So it's not a huge deal, but there's always someone.
Okay. And in your experience, which are the main difficulties of the students in learning, for example, philosophy?
The main difficulty is that they are so trained by the school to learn things and then repeat it. That's basically what's, I guess that's similar in every school system, but you go to school and the teacher passes on the knowledge, and then you're supposed to learn it, and then you're supposed to repeat it in a test. But then philosophy is so much about thinking for yourself. And this individual autonomous thinking is usually not so well developed. Even if it is, it's not just in philosophy, of course, it's in other subjects as well. That's the ideal. Students should be independent, they should learn how to think, but of course, in the system, we don't do much of it. It's basically passing on the knowledge, learning stuff, remembering stuff, repeating stuff, get a grade. That's the way it is. That's how the machinery works. But here it's so pronounced in the philosophy course, in the philosophy subject, that the students are supposed to think by themselves, to think autonomously, to form opinions about the subject, about the ideas, to discuss ideas, to argue ideas, to compare ideas. And they're not at all used to it. So, but that's also interesting, because you have the good students, the good students with high grades, have always been good at school. And then they're supposed to think by themselves, and they're supposed to find problems, maybe find problems in what I'm saying, find problems in what Plato is saying. And for them, it's so foreign. They don't know how to do it. It can be even traumatic.
Yeah, it's a funny paradox that maybe the worst students are more willing to, or it's easier for them like thinking than for the good ones.
Yeah. Yeah, that's often the case as well. You have the students who fail lots of other theoretical subjects, but they're very good at discussing, and they sometimes they're very smart, very bright, and you can have really good philosophical discussions with them. Sometimes you can have a nice 50-minute philosophical discussion with the typical bad students with bad grades, and the good students, they sit there and they don't know what's happening. They want me to give them the answers, whatever, give them the information so they can write it down.
Yeah, they prefer repeating by heart, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you prefer the bad students, I guess.
Yeah, I do. They're more fun.
Okay, nice.
The bad students who don't care about their grades, but who are interested in discussing.
Yeah,
I would say they are the best philosophy students. Very few of my students, I think, ever studied philosophy at university. It's not their main interest.
Okay, so
there's no money in it.
yes.
Of course, they're smart. They think about their career. Okay, what am I going to do with my life? What kind of job am I going to have? If you study philosophy, you can become a philosophy teacher, or you can become a philosophy professor. But that's not a dream many high school students have. Okay. So they don't go to university either to study something they're interested in, most of the times. they do it as well to
get a job. Yeah.
To get a job, to get an education, get a grade, get a job.
So it's not that popular philosophy in Sweden, I guess.
No. It's not.
Yeah, okay. But I think it's not popular nowhere in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's degrees, I think. I would think in France it's a little bit more popular. There's a little bit more intellectual culture. I don't know, maybe Italy as well, but here in Sweden it's not so much intellectual culture. It's more practical, pragmatic culture.
Yeah. Let me ask you a strange question. If you could change something, if you had the power to change something in the school system right now, what would you do?
Wow. I would get rid of grades. I don't know if it would work, but it would be fun to try it. I would get rid of grades.
Totally?
Totally, yes. Okay, I would have a passing grade and a failing grade, but that would be it. And then to get into university, you would have to take a test. Now you get in based on your grades, but then you would need to go to a university and they would test you on your knowledge. Get away of this complete focus on the grades and instead try to instill a focus and interest in the actual learning, the actual knowledge or formation of your being as an intellectual being, as a knowledgeable being. So I don't blame the students. It's the system. Yeah. Of course, that's what happens to you in a system like this. And I don't know, I would be the same maybe if I was a student now. But it's normal, since the grades are what you use, that's your currency. That's what you use to compete with other students for a place at university. You have to have good grades if you want to have a good education, or if you want to be sure that you can get into the university and get the education you want to have, you need good grades. So that, of course, grades becomes everything you think about, how to get good grades. So then you could, if you want to, if that's your inclination, you could focus on learning things, on learning stuff. But then, of course, people think about their future. I have to get an education. I have to get a job. I have to make money to be able to survive. So, of course, the grades becomes the main thing. It becomes paramount. So here's a consequence of the system. Of course, the students will think like this. Of course, they will tell you, well, I have so much to do. I have so many tests. So if you're not going to grade this, I guess it's not going to make much difference for me. I might learn stuff, okay, that's nice, learning things, but I really have to focus on my grades. Sometimes they're very nice about it. They tell me, well, so if it's okay with you, if you don't mind, I'm actually not going to do this if you're not going to grade it, because I'm going to focus on my maths test instead, or whatever.
All this discussion make me think about an idea by Nietzsche. He wrote that all the point of the school system is to get the students used to be obedient guys in order to be obedient workers in the future. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's true.
It's still true now, you think? Okay.
It's still true now. We see still the remnants of it in the system. The fact that you need to be at a certain place at a certain time. And if you're late, you will be punished, or you will get told off by the teacher, and so on. Of course, it's to train the students to be punctual, to be on time, and you give them homework and you give them tests, so you can see, okay, who are the ones. This is an interesting theory, that we're not actually giving students tests to see who is the smartest students. No, we are giving students tests to see who can better perform under pressure. Because those who can perform well under pressure will get good grades on the tests. And then we know these people we can use, we can send them off to the colonies. If it goes back to the 19th century, the English school system, we can send them off to the colonies. And we know that they will be able to manage the job. We have tested them in school. We have put lots of pressure on them. They survived. We know we can put lots of pressure on them in the future, so we can use them as good workers.
Wow. So it's a way to select the best workers for the... system. Yeah.
It's a selection process. So that's a bit cynical. I don't know if it's true, but then the idea is you're not in school to learn things. You're in school to be tested and see if you can stand the pressure. And if you cannot stand the pressure, if we break you, okay, fine. We know we're not going to use you. We're not going to employ you.
It's like to get in the army system.
Yeah, in a way. Oh, yes, I'm not saying this is the ideology today, but I think we see it in the way it is structured. We still have the same. Put 30 students in the same room, give them the same kind of education, independent of their differences, give them a test, put pressure on them, see if they can pass it. So we still have the same system. Even if times have changed, even if ideologies have changed, the system is basically the same still.
Yeah. So for sure, the system doesn't agree with the Aristotle when he says that philosophy is the most noble science just because it's not useful to anything in a way. Because it doesn't serve, is free from the let's say the use system. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I try to tell my students, but then
it works.
no, it doesn't work.
Okay, I guess yes. Okay, nice. So I would like to conclude this interview by asking you if you have some advice for example, young teachers who want to get in the school system. What would you suggest them?
I would suggest that you, first of all, think about why do you want to become a teacher? And if it's not just in order to have a job and make money, then if you do it because you actually want to help young people to learn something, to develop, to become, let's say, become human, become more human, not just a machine, not just an animal, but become a human being, then never forget this. It's so easy to become swallowed up by the system. It's so easy to just work on a rota, just do what you're supposed to do, and you forget why you were there in the first place. You start yourself to just focus on the grades, focus on the test, focus on getting the students through the system. But every once in a while, take a step back and think about why am I doing this? And see if you can incorporate some of this into your teaching. Because you have the curriculum, of course, you have to grade the students, you're working in a system, you're working in a machine, and then there's no getting around this, of course. But try to incorporate these moments where you forget about the grades, you forget about the result, you forget about the sorting system, whatever, that you just do it for the fun of it. You do it for the fun of learning, you do it for the fun of developing yourself. And try to, maybe you will not succeed, but at least for your own sake, not to become too cynical or to despair too much, try to instill this love of learning, love of developing yourself as a human being. Try to instill some of it in the students. And if you can do it with some of the students some of the time, okay, that's something.
Yeah.
I had a little trick. Now, my last course, my philosophy groups, I said that we're going to start each class by you asking a question or raising an idea or saying something. And we're going to spend 15 minutes talking about it. Then we will get on to the real stuff. So I had to pretend that these first 15 minutes is just for fun.
Not
actually, for me, this was the real stuff. This was the important stuff. But I said, okay, just for fun. Come with anything, You can come with, and sometimes they came with real philosophical problems. And there was one guy, it was funny, this was one of the bad students who had bad grades and was seen as a complete failure. He came one class and he asked me, how can we say that there is nothing?
Wow.
Because if we say that there is nothing, we have already said that there is something. If we say there is has to be something. But if this something is nothing, then nothing is something. So I don't get it. Is nothing something or is something nothing? I mean, this was the deepest philosophical question I've ever had from a student.
ontology, like
Yeah,
Parmenides.
and of course the others looked at him like he was an idiot. What are you talking about? And sometimes they just say, well, I'm going to graduate now in a couple of months, and I'm so anxious. I don't know what's going to happen to my life. And okay, so then we talk about this for 15 minutes. But to have this little time, and I know most of the teachers would say, no, I don't have the time. I have so much to do. Yeah, I know. We all have lots to do. But at least if you can, if it's possible, it's very nice to be able to have these little moments where you can just talk about anything, open up the room for any kind of discussion. And if you teach philosophy, you can make it philosophical.
Yeah, yes. It's interesting because I think we have the same problem in Italy, especially in philosophy, which is a subject meant to, open to the discussion, to the dialogue with students. But most of the teachers are so obsessed with the program they have to do. They have to teach so many different notions, ideas, and they forget, I think, to do the most important thing, which is try to use the ideas in order to dialogue, to push the students to think and to have fun. Yeah. But they are so obsessed in, I have to do it, I have to do it. It's a kind of competition between teachers who does more stuff, you know? But I agree with that. I think it's important that the teacher himself start to enjoy the process of teaching, of dialogue, of thinking. Otherwise, it's impossible for the student because they are so involved in the system. They want grades and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can get swallowed up by the system easily, but
yeah,
try to find these pockets of freedom where you can step out of the system for a little while.
Okay, nice. If you have something to add, you want to share, take your time. I'm done with the questions. So if you want to add something, do it.
But there's one interesting thing you just said here, a competition between teachers. I just want to know, is that a thing in Italy? Teachers compete with each other? Because in Sweden, it's not really.
Okay.
So that's one of the positive things. I see that teachers usually help each other. They're very, very supportive of each other. And we don't really have anything to compete about. And it's quite an open environment. And you don't feel the need to prove to your colleagues that you're a good teacher or you're a better teacher than them. So it's quite relaxed. And you can always, if you have issues, if you have problems, or if you feel like shit or whatever, you can always go to a colleague and talk about it. So, but I don't know what it's like with you, if the environment is more competitive there, maybe.
I don't know. Of course, I speak from my experience, but I have been noticed that most of the teachers are anxious people. And they are afraid to do some mistakes, to do not well their job. So they are a bit obsessed with the perfection in a way. And they are afraid to be worst of others teachers. So I think there is a lack of trust in themselves. At the same time, the fear that you can have a problem if you don't do everything right. So yeah, I've noticed this kind of competition. It's not maybe so clear, but you can tell there is this competition with oneself and with others too. So and that doesn't help the teaching, I think, because in a way, most of the teachers are more busy with themselves, with the program, with what they are supposed to do, instead of be open to the students, to the difficulties of the student, the problems. So I've been hearing that often happens in different classrooms that there is no space for questions. Teachers don't like questions. And I think it's a big paradox, because I think the question is one of the most important moment of the teaching. If you don't give the opportunity students to ask questions, how can you push them to be curious, to learn, to be open? But the teachers they don't let them time to do that, because they are obsessed. They have to finish the program. That's an obsession here in Italy. And that's something I've noticed. But it's not like that in Sweden. No.
There is the same kind of stress, yes, that you have to be able to do everything that you're supposed to do. So indeed, teachers are stressed. Teachers speak a lot about this as well, that I don't have the time, or I don't have the time to do anything extra because yes, I have so much to do. I have to be able to finish the course. So there is this kind of stress, but I don't see this competition with other teachers. There's not the need to show that you're better than other teachers. No, I don't think we have that.
Okay, maybe you're more confident than Italian teachers.
I don't know.
Okay, Mathias, it's been very interesting and nice. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I see you later then.
Yeah, see you later.
Bye.
Thank you.